always had a view that a people and a nation are at their best when they are at their creative best, and a people and a nation are at their worst when they are at their creative worst. There is something about the creativity of the human spirit and the human soul that when it gives full expression in any society, in any country, it is not just spiritually enriching, it enriches the mind and enriches something much broader than that as well. And that is how we go about the broader task of creativity, of making new things, of thinking of new things, of designing new things. And sometimes there is, I think, a crazy dichotomy in our discourse on these questions, and it's been around for many decades and many centuries. That over here are these things called the humanities, and within those there lie the creative arts, and over here there are those empirically determined disciplines called the physical or life sciences, and never the twain shall meet. That's a lot of bullshit. I was struggling for the technical term. In fact, I was speaking to someone just before who said to me that her discipline, which she pursues here, is the relationship between art and medicine and science. Am I right? And I paused and reflected on that for a bit. I thought, that is true. We all know of music therapy, we all know of art therapy, and those of us who've had either experience as recipients of the medical profession, and I've been carved up a few times now by doctors. Much more often in politics. The wisdom of, let's call it the unity of the traditional spheres, is profound. The wonderful thing about the Chinese aesthetic tradition is this unity of the spheres, to borrow a Western concept, and Western aesthetics has been there almost since the start. And it is, I think, one of the great wisdoms that we can imbibe from the high civilization that is China, and the other high civilizations represented in much of what we in the West call Asia. So for those of you who are here, and Ian tells me there are 2,500 students at the College of Fine Arts, can I say on behalf of a grateful nation, thank you. I don't see you folks as a burden on the nation. I see you folks as leading the nation's creativity, and across the spheres, across what you might classically define as the economy, and across what you might classically define as industry. And even the dismal science one day will open itself and its mind to Fred's discipline, the economy.
We're nobody afraid of.
Well, if you look at the economists, now that Harcourt has intervened, I shall now respond. If you look at the economy and the analysis of the animal spirits, undertaken originally, of course, by Keynes, and more recently in the rediscovery of the same in the global financial crisis, I think it takes more of an artist than a scientist to define what actually the animal spirits are and where they may take the gyrations on global stock markets and the rest. Its connection with rationality and the empiricism of the so-called hard sciences is, I think, a very thin membrane. Here, I'm pleased that when I was in a position to do so as Prime Minister of the country, we were able to support the University of New South Wales in the redesign of this marvellous piece of real estate. Of course, the original owners have been acknowledged here already. But in turning this College of Fine Arts into the institution which it set out and struggled to become in the early 1960s, and to become what I think will be a major creative industry space, hub and source of inspiration to the lungs and heart of the city of Sydney, and the nation therefore, we're pleased to get behind it. So $48 million worth of taxpayer dollars signed off by yours truly is going into the redevelopment of this site. Fred and Ian tell me that it'll be open for business sometime in 2013. Give me a precise date, Ian.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down.
The 30th of February.
Okay. So he's on record now saying the 28th of February. But I think this is an investment well worth it, because anyone who is in the creative business, anyone who is in the business of creating new things out of old or something out of nothing, deserves a decent space in which to work. And I think it's important that those of you who will lead the Australian creative industries in the future are appropriately nurtured in a place like this. Finally, if I could just touch on this, looking at this aircraft carrier bearing the towering mountains of Guilin on it as it steams toward us. Art, and more generally, the creative arts and the performing arts, the arts writ large, do have a capacity to speak to our common humanity in a way which those in the political class rarely reflect on. Certainly, having spent most of my adult life studying China, Chinese language, Chinese aesthetics, and everything else has been kind of something I picked up on the way. The ability for beauty to speak to beauty universally, and the ability for art reflective of both joy and sadness and despair in the universal language of these humanities, is something which I believe in the age of globalisation will now speak with a much louder voice. Why do I say that? Because the world is shrinking. As a result, we are all from everywhere. In this country, to some extent, we have always been that way. But because of the digital revolution, because of the revolution in the contraction of time and space, and that we all now move across our common habitat called the Earth, our ability to speak beyond language lies often in things of beauty, in things of creativity, things which challenge and things which inspire. And therefore, as all these once disparate cultures separated by geography and oceans come more and more together in the digital space, and increasingly in the physical space, these things, these objects of beauty and these objects of artistic challenge are going to become very much our new world's lingua franca. It's not going to be a lingua sinica, it's not going to be a lingua americana, even less a classical lingua franca, but probably lingua mundus, which is where we need to land. So for those of you in the business, thank you for doing what you're doing. I think in causing us to imagine a world where we don't simply rip each other's heads off as the first natural response to human disagreement, but in fact find those things which unite rather than divide. This forms part of the canvas on which you collectively work in this wonderful college. Thank you for your generosity.